welcome to today's Fiddle Focus video. Today we are going to be diving into how to play backup for fiddle tunes. As fiddlers, we are often in the spotlight, and that is as it should be. We are obviously the best instrument and the most important, but sometimes it's nice to take a back seat and just fiddle along blithely in the background. So today I'm going to take you through a few different options for backup playing so that you can support the melody and really let it shine, but also add some energy and oomph to it. If you'd like sheet music and practice tracks for the tune that we're going to be using to demonstrate this idea in the lesson today, you can get those at one of the links in the description. By the way, today we're going to be focusing specifically on playing backup for major tunes. We're focusing on A major, and we're also not going to be talking about any other tunes except reels. But there's also jigs, there are waltzes, so hopefully we'll get into that another time. All right, we're here to fiddle. Let's fiddle. So before we get started, there are two general tips I want you to keep in mind when you're playing backup. Tip number one is try to play a little quieter than the melody. It's very easy to kind of get focused on what we're doing over here and not pay as much attention to what people are doing over there. But when you're playing backup, your job is to be supportive. It's not to be in the limelight. So you don't want to be going like this. You'd rather be going like this. Tip number two, and this is just a general rule, but sometimes it is broken by me. Often you want to be playing your backup notes or chords below the melody, if you can. So if the tune is happening up here, you want your backup to be down here on the lower strings. So instead of this, you get this. Okay, so keeping those general tips in mind, let's figure out how we're going to get started playing backup. So for our first three backup options, the main thing we need to know is what is the one chord or the one note of this tune. Here's what I mean by that. If a tune is in A major, the root note and the one note or one chord of that scale is going to be A. One, so the first note. You can find A's elsewhere on the fiddle if you want, like the first finger on the G string. So what we want to do is figure out what key are we in? Because if we're in A, the root note is A. If we're in D, the root note is D. There are a few different ways that you might figure out what key a tune is in. You could just ask someone if you're playing with other people, or if you're familiar with music theory, that kind of thing, you could look at the sheet music and figure it out from the key signature at the beginning of the tune. But even that can be a little deceptive because there are various modes. So 3 sharps could mean A major, but it could also mean F sharp minor. You could look at the last note of the tune. Often the last note of the tune is the root note of the tune, but you never know, might not be. So my favorite way to figure it out is really just to search around while other people are playing the tune or while you're listening to a recording and figure out what feels like that bass note of the tune, the note that just feels like home, it feels like the root of that tune. So that might happen something like this. You see how when I found that root note, it just felt right. It felt like home. So for the tune that we're focusing on today, Shenandoah Falls, the root note of that tune is A because it's in A major. Let's find the lowest A on the fiddle because we want to stay out of the way of the melody. Remember, we're trying to go lower. So we have that A note that we can play, but we could also play an A double stop. We can figure that chord, that double stop, out by playing the A arpeggio and choosing any 2 notes from that arpeggio. If you don't want to worry about that, that's fine. All you need to know is your first finger on the bottom 2 strings makes an A chord. Okay, so we have laid the foundation. Let's go to backup option number 1, which is to hold the one note or chord throughout the entire tune. If you take nothing away from this video, that's a good takeaway. Usually you can just hold the note through the entire tune. So that might sound something like this. moving on briskly to option number 2. Option 2 is just to play one note per beat. So in a reel, we're kind of thinking in 2 beats per measure. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So that 1 and 3 are kind of the 2 beats of the measure. It's often where the natural foot tap is in the tune. So if you play one note per beat, it would go like this. And one chord per beat would sound like this. Okay, option number 3 is to play a rhythmic pattern on that one chord. This could be a bunch of eighth notes. And when I do that, I kind of like to actually emphasize the 2 and the 4. So going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Or you could also do this pattern of 1 quarter note, 2 eighth notes, 1 quarter note, 2 eighth notes, which would sound like this. So this is what both of those options would sound like. And now if you do a chord, alright, we're going to pause here for a second because for the next 3 options, we need to figure out 2 other notes or chords that might work with this tune. We've got our 1 chord, but we want the 4 and the 5 chord as well. Here's what I mean by that. Remember, in our A scale, the 1 is the A, the first note of the scale. So the 4 would be, you guessed it, the 4th note of the scale, A, B, C sharp, D, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the 5 would be the 5th note of the scale, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, A, B, C sharp, D, E. So we've got the A note, we've got the D note, and we've got the E note. Those are our 1, 4, and 5 notes. So down on the bottom 2 strings, that's A right here, D, open D, and E, first finger on D. We can also figure out the double stops for the 4 and 5 chord. So our 1 chord, remember, is that first finger over both bottom strings. The D chord is going to be based on the D major scale. For those of you who want to skip this, all you got to do is play your first finger on the G with your open D. And that's a D chord. But the way you get there, you might try playing a D arpeggio and picking any 2 notes in that arpeggio. So that's D, F sharp, A, so you might do D and A, but we want to be on the lower strings, so we're going D and A. For the E chord, let's do the same thing. So we'll play an E arpeggio. So that's E, G sharp, and B. So on the bottom 2 strings, what that might look like is E, and then let's find the B below that note. My fingers are still waking up. Excuses, excuses. All right, so now we have our 1 chord, first finger over bottom 2 strings. Our 4 chord, which is first finger on the G string with the open D. And our 5 chord, which is second finger on the G string with your first finger on the D string. The 1 note and chord kind of have this homey feel to them. The 4 chord and note have a bit more of, I'd say, a wistful feeling to them, sort of like you're far away from home and you miss home. And the 5 chord has a bit of a, we're almost there, almost like an urgent feeling to it, in my mind. You can see home and you're almost there, but not yet. These are the 3 main chords you're going to need to back up a major tune, the 1, 4, and 5. And that'll be different depending on what key you're in. So if you're in D, it'll be D, G, and A, the 1, 4, and 5. And if you're in G, it would be G, C, and D. 1, 4, 5. All right, all of that brings us to option number 4. This is to play long tones on the 1, 4, and 5, which raises the question, how do we know when to use the 4 and the 5 as opposed to the 1? There are a few ways to do this. You could look at a chord chart if you have it, and you'll just see them right there. You could stay on the 1 chord until it just kind of doesn't sound good, and then try something else, and you'll have a 50-50 chance generally of picking the right thing. You can just do general trial and error, listen through the tune, play those 1, 4, and 5s along with the tune, and whenever you feel like the tune has a different feeling to it and there's a shift, try one of the different chords. And the way to choose which one, for me, has often come down to the sort of feeling of it, the mood. So if I'm in a part of the tune that feels a little wistful, I might try the 4 chord because chances are the wistful chord is going to work. This might just be me, by the way, but that's the way it feels. So the beginning of this tune goes da 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 da, and that da, to me, that feels like it's doing something different. Maybe it's a little wistful. So let's try that 4 chord. Da. That actually works. And then we've got da 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 dum. Feels like that da 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 dum kind of calls for something else. So let's try da 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 dum. That's our 5 chord. So here's what that would sound like playing long tones on the 1, 4, and 5 all the way through the A part of the tune. Now let's try that with the chords. Okay, that's sounding pretty good. Let's try option number 5. Option 5 is to play 1 note per beat on the 1, 4, and 5 chords. So once you've experimented and kind of figured out where those might go in the tune, that might be a good time to start trying to do that 1 note per beat. And here's what that would sound like with 1 note. Here's what it would sound like with chords. Last but not least, option number 6. And this is to play the 1, 4, and 5 chords with one of those patterns we talked about earlier. So you could do 1/8 notes like this. You could do 1/4 and 2/8 like this. You could do 1/8 notes with double stops. And you could do 1/4s and 1/8 notes with double stops. All right, you guys, that wraps up today's Fiddle Focus video. There are so many different ways to back up a tune, and I just gave you a few options today, and we were focusing on major tunes and reels. There's so many other kinds of chords you can get into, all kinds of things that you can do, but this at least gives you a little bit of a baseline, and I hope that it helps you feel more confident when you're jamming along with your friends. Again, if you would like sheet music and practice tracks for this tune that was featured today, Shenandoah Falls, there is a link in the description for that. If you happen to have a moment to click the subscribe button, I would greatly appreciate that, but if not, no pressure. Happy fiddling, and I hope to see you in the next video.